What if I told you that archaeologists may have found the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah? Imagine a place lost in time, shrouded in mystery, where an explosion of apocalyptic proportions would have turned everything into ashes. But what if, beyond the destruction, there was something even more surprising hidden beneath the sands of time? Something that challenges history, science, and even our deepest beliefs? Today, you will learn about a discovery that could change everything we know. Charred traces, minerals crystallized by extreme temperatures, chemical evidence that points to an unprecedented cataclysmic event. But the big question is this proof that Sodom and Gomorrah really existed? Or are we facing a natural phenomenon that has never been understood? Welcome to another deep dive into biblical archaeology. Here, we not only unravel ancient mysteries, but we also reveal how these discoveries can impact our way of seeing the past and, who knows, even the future. And before we continue, tell me here in the comments, do you believe that Sodom and Gomorrah were real cities destroyed by a divine event? Or do you think it's all just an ancient legend? While you think about this, I invite you to travel with me to one of the most enigmatic places on the planet. And believe me, what the archaeologists found will leave your jaw dropping. Just think, ancient records speak of fire and sulfur falling from the sky. But what if I told you that scientists have found traces of pure sulfur and vitrified materials at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees C? This doesn't happen by chance. Get ready, because the evidence we are going to reveal today could be the missing link between history and faith. And the question remains, are we facing confirmation of one of the most enigmatic accounts in the Bible, or does science have another explanation for this phenomenon? Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you see now could completely change your perception of Sodom and Gomorrah. But before we move forward with this discovery that could rewrite history, I need you to do something very important. Are you really prepared to know the truth about Sodom and Gomorrah? Because what comes next might challenge everything you believed until now. And if this evidence is real, it could prove that events described in the Bible are not just symbolic reports, but concrete facts of our history. And that's exactly why staying informed about the mysteries of the Bible's lost places is essential. With each new excavation, science and faith intertwine, revealing truths hidden for millennia. What else could be hidden? Are other places mentioned in Scripture still waiting to be found? What if there is more evidence that the sacred history we know has much deeper roots than we realize? Now tell me, do you really want to continue on this journey of discovery? If yes, then leave your like right now and subscribe to the channel, because this not only helps me bring more revealing content, but also makes YouTube itself understand that this type of investigation needs to be shared with more people. And, believe me, there are many mysteries that still need to be unraveled. So, without further ado, let's get straight to the scientific evidence that could prove, or disprove, once and for all the existence of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I'm already saying, what the archaeologists found, it's something you need to see to believe. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah. It is one of the most enigmatic and impactful in the entire Bible, registered in the book of Genesis 19. She talks about two cities that would have been completely destroyed by fire and brimstone that fell from the sky, an event described as a severe divine judgment against the corruption and sin of its inhabitants. But what really happened there? Is this story a symbolic account, or is there concrete evidence that these cities existed and were, in fact, consumed by apocalyptic destruction? First of all, let's recap what the biblical text itself tells us. According to the narrative, Sodom and Gomorrah were prosperous cities, but sunk in practices considered perverse. Abraham, one of the patriarchs of faith, even interceded for them, asking God if he would destroy the righteous along with the wicked. God replied that if there were only 10 righteous, he would spare the city. But as we know, destruction happened. And here begins a very interesting detail that raises questions scientific, archaeological, and theological. According to the biblical account, angels were sent to warn Abraham's nephew Lot and his family to flee the city before its destruction. As they escaped, Lot and his daughters ran toward the mountains, but his wife looked back and, as the scripture says, was turned into a pillar of salt. But the most impressive part comes now. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was described as a rain of fire and brimstone descending from the sky, consuming everything instantly. If we think rationally, this is not common. What could cause an event of this magnitude? Could it be a volcanic eruption, an asteroid impact, an unknown atmospheric phenomenon? Or would we be facing a truly supernatural event? The most intriguing thing is that, for centuries, scholars, scientists, and archaeologists attempted to locate the remains of these cities to prove whether this destruction actually occurred. After all, if there are physical traces of mass destruction in this region, this could completely change the way we interpret this biblical account. And this is where archaeology begins to provide some surprising answers. The first question that arises is, where exactly were Sodom and Gomorrah? There are several theories about the location of these cities, but two stand out among the most recent research. One of them points to a region close to the Dead Sea, where ancient settlements were found that may have suffered sudden destruction. The other most accepted theory currently indicates a place called el-Hammam, Jordan, where archaeologists discovered shocking evidence of extremely intense destruction. Now, think with me. If what the Bible says about the destruction of Sodom is true, then we would need to find physical evidence of a huge explosion of fire and extreme heat. And guess what? That's exactly what archaeologists found. Studies conducted in el-Hammam revealed vitrified silica traces, a material that only forms at temperatures above 2,000 degrees C. To give you an idea, this is hotter than a normal volcanic eruption and comparable to the heat of a nuclear explosion. Furthermore, researchers identified pure crystallized sulfur waste spread across the site. This detail is very important because the sulfur found there has a composition very different from the common sulfur found on Earth. It appears in the form of small, highly concentrated white balls, something that, according to scientists, is characteristic of high-temperature events such as cosmic impacts or massive explosions. But that's not all. Another intriguing discovery was the presence of charred structures and ruins that indicate sudden and violent destruction. Archaeologists have found remains of collapsed buildings, melted bricks, and even charred human skeletons, all pointing to a catastrophic event. And one more curious detail. The evidence shows that this destruction happened in a single moment, and not gradually. This means that whatever happened there was sudden, devastating, and unprecedented. Now stop for a moment and reflect. Doesn't this exactly remind you of the biblical description of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? Fire and brimstone falling from the sky, cities obliterated in seconds, extreme heat incinerating everything around them. The similarity between the biblical narrative and archaeological discoveries is simply striking. But what could have caused such an event? Could it have been a volcanic explosion? An earthquake followed by fires? Or would we be facing a cosmic event, such as the explosion of a meteor in the atmosphere, similar to the famous Tunguska event in Siberia in 1908? This is one of the biggest debates between scientists and Bible scholars, and there is a lot to be analyzed before we can draw a definitive conclusion. And you, what do you think of all this so far? Were Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed exactly as the Bible describes? Or is there a scientific explanation for this ancient mystery? I really want to know your opinion, so comment below. I believe, whether you think archaeological evidence supports biblical history, or I still have doubts if you think you need more proof. And hold on to that, because the evidence that follows is even more impressive. What scientists discovered could change everything we know about this destruction. What if I told you that there is evidence that the impact was so intense that it even left marks on the region's soil, completely altering its composition? Let's talk about this now. The search for the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah has intrigued historians, archaeologists, and scientists for centuries. After all, if these cities really existed and were destroyed as catastrophically as the Bible describes, where are the remains of this destruction? This is the question that has motivated expeditions, excavations, and meticulous analyses over the past few decades. For a long time, many believed that cities were submerged in the Dead Sea, one of the most inhospitable and mysterious places on the planet. This theory arose because the name Dead Sea itself is associated with the idea of destruction and the fact that, geographically, it is close to the region where the Bible suggests that Sodom and Gomorrah were located. But as new evidence emerged, archaeologists began to look at other locations, and two of them became the main candidates: Tal el-Hammam in Jordan and Bab ed-Dra and Numeira in the Dead Sea region. The strongest hypothesis today points to Tal el-Hammam, a Bronze Age fortified city-state that, according to archaeologists, was abruptly destroyed by an event of extreme heat and overwhelming force. This place has a unique characteristic. Its destruction was so intense that the city remained abandoned for more than 600 years, something extremely unusual for the time. Typically, cities destroyed by war or natural disasters were quickly rebuilt. But Tal el-Hammam was uninhabitable for centuries. Why? The answer may lie in discoveries made in recent years. During excavations, archaeologists found evidence of a very high-temperature explosion, so intense that it made clay and ceramic bricks melt and turn into glass. Furthermore, the remains found at the site indicate that the city's inhabitants were instantly vaporized, exactly as described in the Bible. To give an idea of the level of destruction, skeletons were found in positions that suggest the victims were struck by a wave of shock and fire so powerful that their bodies were thrown through the air and fell dismembered to the ground. And most intriguing, geochemical analyses carried out on the soil of Tal el-Hammam revealed very high levels of crystallized sulfur, something that coincides with the biblical narrative that fire and sulfur fell from the sky to consume the city. But if it wasn't a supernatural event, what could have caused such destruction? Some scientists believe that Sodom may have been destroyed by a cosmic impact event, similar to the Tunguska explosion in Siberia in 1908. This explosion occurred when an asteroid or comet entered the Earth's atmosphere and detonated at a height of approximately 5 to 10 kilometers, generating a wave of heat and destruction that devastated an area of more than 2,000 kilometers. If a similar event happened over Tal el-Hammam, this would explain the intense heat that vitrified the city, the shock wave that pulverized the buildings, and the sudden destruction that meant the city was never rebuilt again. Now, if Tal el-Hammam is the real Sodom, where would Gomorrah be? Many believe that Bab ed-Dra and Numeira, located further south near the eastern shore of the Dead Sea, may be the places where Gomorrah and the other cities mentioned in the Bible were destroyed. These archaeological sites have revealed something equally impressive: evidence of intense fires that completely destroyed settlements. In Bab ed-Dra, for example, hundreds of burned tombs were found, indicating that a great destructive event occurred at the time when, according to the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah were exterminated. Another curious detail is that both Tal el-Hammam, Bab ed-Dra, and Numeira are situated exactly where the biblical text suggests these cities were. This means that, for the first time in history, we have concrete archaeological evidence that can confirm one of the most controversial accounts in the Bible. And this leads us to an inevitable question. Would this be definitive proof that Sodom and Gomorrah really existed? Researchers continue to analyze soil layers in these regions to understand what really happened there thousands of years ago. Some argue that it could have been a volcanic eruption, but there are no active volcanoes in this region, which rules out this hypothesis. Others suggest that a catastrophic fire may have consumed the cities, but the heat needed to melt rocks and turn sand into glass suggests something much more powerful. The truth is that, regardless of the explanation, recent discoveries are in line with the biblical narrative of a city that was annihilated by heaven. Whether the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was caused by cosmic impact or another extreme natural phenomenon, it not only would confirm the story of the Bible, but it would also alert us to the risks of similar events in the future. After all, we know that the Earth has been hit by asteroids before, and an impact the size of what may have happened in Tall el-Hammam could destroy a modern city in a matter of seconds. And now I want to know your opinion. With everything we have revealed so far, do you believe these discoveries are proof that Sodom and Gomorrah really existed? Or do you still think there is a lack of more evidence to say this with certainty? Comment below, "It's real," if you believe that we have found the ruins of the city destroyed by divine judgment, or "I still have doubts," if you think we still need more concrete proof. But calm down, because this is just the beginning. The evidence we are going to present now is even more impressive. Have you heard about the strange materials found in the soil of these cities? What archaeologists discovered could be the key to unlocking the riddle of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah once and for all. Get ready, because what comes next could change everything you've ever heard about this mystery. The archaeological evidence found at Tall el-Hammam and other possible locations of Sodom and Gomorrah is simply stunning. What scientists discovered could forever change the way we view biblical accounts. If before the destruction of these cities was seen as just a symbolic story, today, with advances in excavations and scientific analyses, there are reasons to reconsider this perspective, and the facts speak for themselves. One of the most surprising discoveries is the presence of molten silica crystals spread across the site. This type of material only forms at temperatures extremely high, above 2000 degrees C. To give you an idea, this temperature is much higher than that of a common fire or even a volcanic eruption. The only explanation for this formation is that a catastrophic event of unimaginable proportions hit the city abruptly. This is compatible with the biblical account of a divine fire consuming Sodom and Gomorrah within seconds, but it doesn't stop there. Excavations also revealed vitrified bricks and charred remains, evidence that a sudden extreme heat wave hit the region. This raises an important question. What could generate heat so intense that it could melt entire structures? An ordinary fire could never reach this temperature, which means that something much more powerful was involved in the destruction of these cities. Another even more intriguing detail is that archaeologists have identified levels abnormally high crystallized, pure sulfur. This finding is absolutely unusual because the sulfur found in this region has peculiar characteristics. It appears in the form of small, concentrated spheres, a phenomenon that only occurs at extreme temperatures. But the most interesting thing is that this type of sulfur is not common in the Earth's crust, which raises even more doubts about its origin. The Bible describes that fire and brimstone fell from heaven and destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, centuries later, science finds evidence that corroborates exactly this description. Coincidence? These discoveries have led researchers to consider a new hypothesis, that Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed by a cosmic impact event. Something similar to the Tunguska event, which happened in Siberia in 1908. When a meteor exploded in the Earth's atmosphere with a force equivalent to hundreds of Hiroshima nuclear bombs. This impact was so powerful that it devastated thousands of square kilometers of forest, burning trees and pulverizing everything around it. If something similar occurred in Tall el-Hammam, this could explain the extreme heat, the presence of vitrified silica and concentrated sulfur. Furthermore, analyses carried out on the region's soils indicate the presence of high levels of platinum, iridium, and other rare metals, which are typical indicators of meteor impacts. This further reinforces the hypothesis that a celestial body entered the atmosphere and exploded over the city, generating a destructive fireball and releasing a wave of heat capable of obliterating everything in its path. If this theory is correct, it means that Sodom and Gomorrah may have been destroyed by a rare natural phenomenon, but one that perfectly fits the biblical description of a divine judgment. The excavations also revealed something striking about the inhabitants of Tall el-Hammam at the time of its destruction. Archaeologists found fragmented skeletons scattered across the city, suggesting that many victims were hit by a devastating shockwave. Some bones show signs that the bodies were instantly charred, a common phenomenon in very high temperature explosions. This means that whoever was in the city at the time of the event did not have time to react, which fits perfectly with the biblical account of the sudden destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Another curious detail is the way in which the buildings were destroyed. Instead of collapsing gradually, as would happen in an earthquake, the structures appear to have been toppled by a force coming from above, as if a massive explosion had pressed everything down to the ground. This again goes back to the effect of an air explosion, like the one at Tunguska, where the shock wave destroyed everything in a matter of seconds. And there is one more intriguing mystery. After the destruction event, the tall el-Hammam area remained uninhabitable for over 600 years. This is something extremely rare, because normally, after a catastrophe, cities were quickly rebuilt. But for some reason, this place remained abandoned for centuries. This suggests that the soil may have become toxic or sterile due to the impact of the explosion and the large amount of sulfur and other chemical elements released into the atmosphere. Now, given all this evidence, it is difficult to ignore the fact that the biblical account of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah may be based on real events. Of course, there are still debates among scientists, and some questions need more research to be fully answered. But what has been discovered so far is more than enough to raise a serious question about the veracity of this historical account. And now I want to know your opinion. Do you believe these discoveries are definitive proof that Sodom and Gomorrah really existed? Or do you think we still need more evidence to confirm this event? Comment below, absolute proof, if you think the archaeological finds are conclusive, or I want more evidence, if you still have doubts about this catastrophic destruction. But wait, because what comes next could be even more shocking. What if I told you that there are ancient historical records that describe an event very similar to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? What if other civilizations of the time had also witnessed this tragedy and left their own accounts of what happened? You won't believe what the ancient texts reveal about this mystery. The evidence found at Tal el-Hammam is impressive, but the big question still remains. What really caused the destruction of this city? For many scientists, the answer may lie in a cosmic event of devastating proportions. The most accepted theory suggests that Sodom may have been destroyed by an aerial meteor explosion, similar to the Tunguska event in Siberia in 1908. On that occasion, an asteroid exploded approximately 10 kilometers from the surface, releasing energy equivalent to 1,000 Hiroshima bombs and devastating 2,000 kilometer towns of forest. Reports from the time mention an intense flash, an overwhelming heat wave, and an explosion that could be felt thousands of kilometers away. Now imagine such an event occurring over Sodom. The extreme heat would have vaporized everything instantly, melting rocks, charring buildings, and vitrifying the ground, exactly as archaeologists found during excavations. The shockwave was reportedly so strong that it threw debris miles away and pulverized the city's inhabitants in a matter of seconds. This would explain why the skeletons found in the region show signs of having been exposed to absurdly high temperatures. Another essential point in this theory is the presence of high concentrations of sulfur and rare metals such as platinum and iridium, which are indicative of meteor impacts. The Bible describes that fire and brimstone fell from the sky, and this description matches exactly what happens when a meteor explodes in the atmosphere. If a celestial body entered the atmosphere over Sodom, the explosion would have caused a firestorm, spreading particles of incandescent sulfur throughout the city. The most impressive thing is that computer simulations carried out by scientists show that an event of this type would have caused destruction identical to that identified in Tal el-Hammam. The shock waves would collapse buildings, while the fireball resulting from the explosion would make the place uninhabitable for centuries. This would also explain why the city remained abandoned for over 600 years, an extremely rare phenomenon in antiquity. In addition to the Bible, there are ancient records from other civilizations that mention an intense light in the sky, followed by massive destruction in the Dead Sea region. This suggests that the event was witnessed by neighboring peoples and recorded in different ways, which further reinforces the hypothesis of a real and devastating event. If this theory is true, It would not only confirm the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, as described in the Bible, but also would show that Earth has always been vulnerable to catastrophes from space. An event like this could happen again, which is why scientists constantly monitor near-Earth objects that could pose a risk to the planet. Now I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that Sodom was destroyed by a cosmic explosion? Comment cosmic explosion if you think this theory makes sense, or I still have doubts if you think we need more evidence. And in the next section, we will explore another intriguing question. Was this destruction already expected? There are ancient records that suggest that the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah was already sealed long before the catastrophe occurred. Are the prophecies about this event real? What do they tell us about other possible future destruction? You can't miss what comes next. Even with all the impressive evidence we have analyzed so far, one of the biggest challenges in any archaeological discovery is the definitive confirmation. When it comes to Sodom and Gomorrah, this becomes even more complex because we are dealing with an event shrouded in mystery, scientific debates, and theological interpretations. The central question is, would Tall el-Hammam really be Sodom, as some archaeologists suggest, or would we be looking at another settlement destroyed by a catastrophic event, but with no direct connection to the biblical account? Although much evidence points to this theory, not all experts agree with this. Identification. One of the main obstacles is the lack of written records confirming the name of the city. In archaeology, the most reliable way to identify a biblical site is to find ancient inscriptions that explicitly mention the name of the city or clear references that link that place to a historical event recorded in ancient texts. Until now, there is no tablet, inscription, or document directly linking Tall el-Hammam to the name Sodom. This causes many scholars to adopt a more skeptical stance towards identifying the site. Another point that generates debate is that there are other settlements in the Dead Sea region that also show signs of sudden and violent destruction, such as Babedra and Numera. Some archaeologists believe that Sodom and Gomorrah could be in these locations and not necessarily in Tall el-Hammam. After all, the Bible mentions that the cities of the plain were destroyed, and not just Sodom. Then there is a real possibility that there are multiple archaeological sites related to the event. The absence of written evidence, however, does not mean that Tall el-Hammam cannot be Sodom. Many ancient settlements did not leave direct written records, especially those that were destroyed abruptly and did not have continuous occupation over the centuries. Furthermore, biblical archaeology often works with indirect clues, such as topographic descriptions, patterns of destruction, and similarities between the events reported in ancient texts and the remains found in excavations. And in that sense, Tall el-Hammam fits perfectly in the description of Sodom, a prosperous settlement that was suddenly annihilated by a force from heaven, leaving the land uninhabitable for centuries. Another big question asked by more skeptical scholars is, could the destruction of the city have been caused by other natural phenomena, without connection to a cosmic event or divine judgment? Some suggest that an earthquake followed by fires could have devastated the city, but there is a big problem with this hypothesis. An earthquake does not produce temperatures above 2,000 degrees Celsius, nor does it vitrify stone and ceramics. Furthermore, there are no records of volcanic activity in the region that could justify the presence of vitrified silica and crystallized sulfur. Some researchers also raise the possibility that the city could have been destroyed by a war or a military attack, where armies could have purposely set the structures on fire. However, the evidence found at Tall el-Hammam show no signs of armed conflict, such as weapons, walls collapsed by projectile impacts, or remnants of battles. On the contrary, the destruction seems to have happened suddenly and catastrophically, without there being time for escape or defense. This further reinforces the hypothesis that the event that devastated the city came from an external and uncontrollable source, like a cosmic explosion. Faced with these uncertainties, the scientific community remains divided. While some archaeologists believe that the evidence at Tall el-Hammam is strong enough to suggest that this location may actually be Sodom, Others claim that there is still a lack of the final piece of the puzzle, a textual confirmation or more scientific data that eliminates all doubts. But there is something that cannot be ignored. The impact of this discovery goes far beyond the academic world. If Tal el-Hammam is proven to be in fact Sodom, this would represent one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in history, as it would confirm an event described in the Bible with surprising precision. And even though the city is not definitively identified as Sodom, the evidence of its destruction remain one of the greatest archaeological mysteries of our time. And now I want to know your opinion. Do you think the evidence is enough to say that Tal el-Hammam is Sodom? Comment, Sodom confirmed. Whether we believe that archaeology has already given us sufficient evidence or I still need more evidence. If you think that studies still need to advance to a definitive conclusion, and stay tuned, because in the next section we will explore something even more intriguing. What were the consequences of this discovery for science and faith? The impact of this research could change the way we view not only Sodom and Gomorrah, but also other biblical events that may have real scientific basis. What does this mean for our understanding of history? Get ready, because the answers may be even more surprising than you imagine. If Sodom and Gomorrah really existed and were destroyed as violently as the Bible describes, what else could be hidden in the story? This is the big question that arises in light of the evidence found. The discovery of Tal el-Hammam not only strengthens the biblical narrative, but also opens the way for new investigations into other events described in Scripture that for centuries have been seen by many as mere symbolic or mythological stories. Confirmation of the destruction of an ancient city by a cosmic event, a devastating aerial explosion that vaporized everything in a matter of seconds. It completely changes the way we look at biblical accounts. If this event was real, how many others could there have been? Science and archaeology have advanced rapidly, and each new discovery leads us to an even more intriguing question. How many mysteries of the Bible are still buried beneath the sands of time, waiting to be revealed? If we think about the other great stories in the Bible that have long been considered legends, we realize that many of these stories may also have a basis in fact. For example, Noah's Ark is one of the most debated mysteries of all time. There is evidence that a great flood actually occurred thousands of years ago and impacted entire civilizations, giving rise to similar legends in different cultures. There is research that indicates that Mount Ararat, in Turkey, may contain traces of the vessel that Noah built to survive the flood. If concrete evidence of the Ark is found, it could be further proof that the events described in the Bible are more than just symbolic accounts. Another biblical mystery that remains unsolved is the Tower of Babel. The Bible describes that men tried to build a tower that would reach the heavens, and God confused languages, scattering the people across the earth. Interestingly, archaeological research has already identified monumental structures from antiquity, such as the Mesopotamian ziggurats, which may have been the inspiration for this story. If Sodom could have been identified, what stops us from finding the ruins of the Tower of Babel and finding out what really happened there? And how about we think about ancient Jerusalem itself? There are still so many sacred sites that remain hidden, like the Solomon's Temple, one of the grandest buildings in ancient history, but its structure has not yet been completely discovered. If the excavations at Tal el-Hammam showed that an entire city can be obliterated and remain hidden for centuries, who can guarantee that there are no other biblical sites waiting to be rediscovered? The impact of these discoveries, it is not only limited to archaeology and science, but also has a direct effect on the faith of millions of people. For centuries, many believed that Sodom and Gomorrah were just a metaphor, a story used to convey a moral lesson. But now, with the real possibility that these cities actually existed and were destroyed exactly as described in the Bible, the line between faith and history becomes even thinner. What was previously seen as impossible begins to become plausible. And with each new discovery, the Bible proves to be not only a sacred book, but also a surprisingly accurate record of historical events. And the most impressive thing is that The implications of this discovery are not limited to the past. If there really was a cosmic impact on Sodom, that means Earth remains vulnerable to similar events in the future. After all, we know that our planet has already been hit by asteroids and meteors on several occasions, and that these events can happen again. Today, scientists constantly monitor space objects that could pose a risk to humanity, but what if an event like the one that destroyed Sodom happened today? Now I want to know your opinion. If Sodom was found, what other great mystery of the Bible would you like to see revealed? Comment, I want the truth about Noah's Ark, if you think this should be the next big archaeological discovery, or the Tower of Babel must be found. It is believed that this is the next mystery that science must unravel. And hold on tight, because in the next section we're going to enter even more surprising territory. What if I told you that there are ancient records, outside of the Bible, that describe an event very similar to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah? Neighboring civilizations also left their own versions of what happened on that fateful day. You won't believe what these texts reveal? Now that we have delved deeply into this investigation into Sodom and Gomorrah, analyzed the scientific evidence, explored archaeological theories, and even connected this discovery with other biblical mysteries, the big question remains: what do you think of all this? The evidence found at el-Hammam is impressive and fits surprisingly well with the biblical account. The extreme heat that vitrified rocks, the charred remains, crystallized pure sulfur, and the sudden destruction are indications that something catastrophic really happened there. But is this enough to confirm, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this city was Sodom? This is one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of recent times, and its impact goes far beyond science. If Sodom was found, how many other biblical mysteries still wait to be revealed? Are we on the verge of a new understanding of the Bible and human history? What if the biblical accounts are not just religious narratives, but actual records of historical events? This means that, at any moment, new discoveries can completely change the way we see the past, and that's why I want to know your opinion. Do you believe the evidence is sufficient proof that Sodom was found? Or do you think there are still more discoveries needed to confirm this story? Comment here below, Sodom has been found, if you believe that this discovery proves the existence of the city, or I'm still not convinced if you think archaeology needs more evidence to confirm this mystery. Your opinion is very important, and I really want to know what you think about it. If you've made it this far, it's because this video really impacted you and awakened your curiosity about the hidden mysteries of the Bible. And that's just the beginning. Subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell to continue this journey with me. There are still many impressive discoveries to be revealed, and you won't want to miss the next videos. If Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed as the Bible describes, what else could be hidden waiting to be discovered? There are reports of a lost paradise, a sacred place where it all began. But what if the Garden of Eden isn't just a myth? There is evidence to suggest that this place may still be hidden somewhere on the planet, and new research points to possible locations. The rivers mentioned in the scriptures, the secrets of Eden, and what archaeology has to say about it will surprise you. I'll wait for you in the next video.